Hello, my name is Lee Weingarten. I'm principal of Weingarten Art Group, and I'm consulting director of public art at the University of Houston system. We're at Moore's Opera House this evening to celebrate the 20th anniversary of Frank Stella's monumental Euphonia, and I have the pleasure of interviewing Mr. Stella this evening. The piece is an icon of American art and particularly of the University of Houston's own public art collection. So, Mr. Stella, welcome to the Moore's Opera House.
Thank you. I've been here before, but it seems good.
What's it like to walk in here 20 years later? It's
a little weird, I have to admit, but it seems okay. I mean, it's not as tense as it was 20 years ago. Yeah, it's sort of over now. Then there was a lot to worry about.
Does it feel the same to you as it did when you installed the work?
Well, it's hard to say. I mean, as I say, it has a sense of being finished and over with or something. It's not. I don't have the sense that I could change it a lot or I should change it. So I'm not so worried. It's a lot more relaxing. Time does that, I guess. Buffer.
How did the process and the final installation influence the work that came after this?
Well, I mean, it's hard to say. I mean, because the working with in the space, in a public space that had such difficult requirements, and things were far away, and a lot of technical things, getting things up there and making it stick on the ceiling, all those kind of everyday problems at the time seemed overwhelming. And so it was really, worrying about a specific design problem, what this shape, this place, that place. So everything was sort of so controlled. So you didn't have, you had to make up your mind, and you had to prepare it and go with it. There wasn't much fooling around, and not much opportunity to adjust anything, really. I guess that's the problem.
And I know that you directed a very large team of local artists. Do you still employ that process, or?
No, we never did that again. Actually, that was unique to this situation. To Houston, we rented a space, but we had people we had done something similar to this in Toronto for the Princess of Wales Theatre, and the people who had worked in Toronto came and worked here, but they also worked with the students and the people here who would pitch in, and so we were in that sense we were pretty well organized. We had the experience of doing it, but we didn't have the experience of overcoming the slightly more difficult surfaces.
And when you saw the site, did you immediately know the various elements and places within the venue that you wanted to activate?
No, it was kind of a nightmare. No, we built a model, and then we simply, banged away at the model, thinking about how we could deal with the spaces. I mean, like on the mezzanine or the balcony out in front, that's pretty easy. You have a long, flat, rectangular surface. You can work on it. You don't have to worry too much about it. But what you're going to do up in the pendentives up there is pretty tough. And so we had to trust the models, which were really small, and we didn't have much sense of the curved surfaces of the space. So it was kind of hit or miss. I mean, either it works or it doesn't. So, and we didn't really know until the end if it was going to work. And then, of course, the simplest solution to that is, of course, to say, "Oh, it works great."
Do you have preferences as to where your work is shown, be it in a gallery or in a public venue?
No, I mean, I think I'm much more, I mean, I like the idea, if I were to talk about what I've done or be interested in it. I don't think it's too sentimental, but I like the idea being a, I wanted to be a New York painter or a New York artist. And so the one-man show in New York City was sort of the kind of venue, that was it. Just, you worked, and then, you'd show 5 to 6 or 7 paintings, whatever it was, in a nice, simple white-walled gallery. And that was, and it seemed really, getting it out of your studio, getting uptown, the life of the artist, that was sort of the goal. There wasn't really anything else to do. There was nowhere else to go. But I do think that, over the years, I like the progression of the one-man exhibitions that I had, because it seems to me that, about every 2 years, say, but I think my record of exhibitions of what are called solo exhibitions is pretty good, because most of the time I had something relatively interesting to show.
Probably more than that. We have a couple of questions from some students on campus. I hope you don't mind if I ask them. And one of them is, who are your favorite artists making public art?
Yeah, that's a really good question, because I never think about public art. Public art now seems like a specialty, and it also seems like a kind of nightmare, because public art has to compete. It's actually, I don't know, competing is not quite the right word, but the architecture, the physical spaces available to artists in public art are not so nice, to put it simply. And exterior spaces, which are, again, surrounded by a kind of architecture or so-called civic plazas and that kind of space, they're really tough on art. They're tough on everybody, actually. So I think it's quite hard. The ideal situation, people would say, for large sculpture or something is outdoors, or the proper setting or something like that. But competing with Mother Nature is not so easy either.
Sure.
So the circumstances, I find, are kind of tough. And you could be nice about it and say they're challenging. But I don't know if you want to, it's hard to meet those kind of challenges.
When you're invited to activate a site, does the site impact your work as much as your own sort of vision?
Well, this is here. It's kind of obvious. There was no compromise. The site ruled, and you were driven by it. So there wasn't much room for expression. You had to conform in a way, or be active within given spaces, and difficult ones at that. But that, you get off by excusing yourself and saying it's challenging. But I don't think that public art in general is very exciting. And, and actually I don't get a lot of offers. Most of these public things are commissions.
Sure.
And they're commissions, and a lot of them are competitions. But I may have entered some competitions, but I certainly wouldn't anymore. I don't know. It's hard to say. And the commissions that I've done, some of them are, you go through the process of the commission, and they give you you make the model and this, that, and the other. And then some of the more successful commissions that I've done, I already had the piece. I just fit it into the thing. And then I'd say, oh, well, that'll be ready in 6 months. But it was already in the studio. So when 6 months later, say, we've been working on this, it's ready. And then we would install it. But that didn't work so well all the time either. One of the things that we did for somewhere actually in Delaware, and there was a huge complaint in an IRS building about the piece, and they eventually moved it. And the idea, how do you know what people are going to say or how they're going to react? But the reason that this piece was moved was that it was too bright and colorful. And when the people came to work on Monday morning, they were too depressed, and they didn't like to be encountered by that much activity of happiness or color. And so they moved, the U.S. government, in its wisdom, moved it somewhere.
Sounds like an unusual reaction.
Yeah, it did surprise me a little bit. But that's what you face. I mean, you
Sure.
don't know. Usually the things are social or political or something, but that was just pure personal aesthetics and feelings.
Well, on a lighter note, one of the students wants to know if you still smoke cigars, because there's an anecdote that cigar smoke did somehow figure into the design of some of the elements in the lobby.
Well, I smoke a little bit, but it's not an anecdote that it figured in. I mean, it's there in a lot of places, but it's transformed in a number of fairly straightforward ways. But what I did with the cigar smoke was to blow smoke rings. And when you blow a smoke ring, if you have conditions with not too much activity or wind, is that the ring floats out into the surface, and then it bifurcates and other smoke rings drop out of it. So it's an interesting process which we photographed, and that gave us a lot of kind of smoky shapes, but a lot of interesting shapes that we then modeled. And we modeled them, most of the ones here that are modeled in this were modeled graphically. So it was really a modeling exercise of the result of the smoke rings breaking up.
And the last question we have for you is, who did you root for in the 2017 World Series?
Yeah, Houston Astros. Did I get that right?
Yes, you did. Thank you, Mr. Stella. Appreciate it.
Okay.
2019 will be the 50th anniversary of public art at the University of Houston System. And we encourage you to follow us on our website and social media channels at Public Art UHS to keep track of all of the programming and events and installations that will be occurring.